Have you ever looked at a headline about a secret government project and wondered if we're living in a sci-fi movie? I mean, seriously, some of the stuff that's come out over the years sounds like it was ripped straight from a Hollywood script, right?
It really does, Alex. But here's the fascinating part. The truth is often far more clinical and in a way more unsettling than the movies. We're diving into the TNT Initiative's doctrinal statement today, which tackles exactly that. The intersection of intelligence programs and how we as a society interpret them.
I love that. It's about separating the hard facts from the occult or supernatural myths that tend to grow around these secret programs. Mike, you've spent a lot of time looking into this framework. Where do we even start with something this massive?
We start with the empirical reality layer. That's the TNT term for what we can actually prove through declassified documents and historical records. Think of it as the bedrock. Before we talk about mind control as a trope, we have to talk about things like Project Artichoke.
Project Artichoke. That sounds strangely culinary for a secret intelligence program. What was the actual goal there? I'm assuming it wasn't about vegetables.
Hardly. It started in the early 50s. The core question was, can we get a person to do something against their will? We're talking about extreme psychological conditions, hypnosis, forced addiction, even surgical interventions. It was a very cold, very clinical look at the limits of human agency.
Wait, so when people talk about the Manchurian Candidate, they aren't just making it up? There was actually a moment in history where the intelligence community was trying to see if they could program a human being?
Exactly, Alex. That's the empirical reality. They were exploring whether human behavior could be influenced under extreme stress. It wasn't magic, though. It was a brutal application of early behavioral psychology. But you can see why the public would later wrap that in a layer of mystery.
It's terrifying to think about, honestly. And that leads right into the big one, right? The program everyone has heard of, even if they don't know the details, MKUltra.
Right. MKUltra is the poster child for these programs. It ran from 1953 all the way to 1973. It's famous for using LSD, but it was so much more than just drugs. They were looking at sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal abuse as tools for breaking the mind.
I've heard stories about people being given drugs without their knowledge. That sounds like a complete breakdown of ethics. How did something like that even stay hidden for 20 years?
Secrecy is a powerful tool, but it's also what creates the symbolic interpretation layer the TNT Initiative talks about. When the public finally found out in the 70s, the details were so shocking that they felt almost supernatural. It felt like the government was practicing a form of black magic on its own citizens.
And that's the pivot point, isn't it? The TNT framework says we have to distinguish between the scientific nature of these programs and the supernatural stories we tell about them. But Mike, if the science is that extreme, is there really a difference to the person on the receiving end?
That's a profound question. From a human rights perspective, the trauma is the same. But from an analytical perspective, which is what the TNT Initiative focuses on, the distinction is vital. If we label it as occult or magical, we lose the ability to study the actual psychological mechanisms used.
I see. It's like that if we call it magic, we stop looking for the chemistry and the psychology behind it. We stop being objective. Let's talk about another one mentioned in the statement, Operation Mockingbird. This one feels particularly relevant today, with all the talk about media bias.
Mockingbird is fascinating because it wasn't about individual minds. It was about the collective mind. It was an alleged effort to influence the media and coordinate propaganda. The goal was to shape how the entire public perceived geopolitical conflicts during the Cold War.
So instead of one person in a room with a hypnotist, it's an entire nation watching the evening news. That's a huge jump in scale. It's basically mind control for a whole society, isn't it?
In a metaphorical sense, yes. And that's where the TNT framework is so helpful. It acknowledges that these influence networks contribute to public debate about information control. But again, it's not some mystical force. It's just strategic communication and leverage over journalists.
It's interesting how these programs always seem to pop up during times of high tension, like the Cold War. It's like the fear of the other makes any method seem justifiable to the people in charge. Does the TNT statement address why this happened then?
It touches on the strategic frameworks. During the Cold War, there was this intense pressure to find an edge. That's actually what led to the Stargate Project. This is the one where the line between science and the unconventional gets really, really thin.
Oh, I've heard of this. This is the men who stare at goats stuff, right? Remote viewing and ESP. Tell me that wasn't actually a government-funded thing.
Oh, it absolutely was. From the 70s until 1995. The government was literally researching if people could see things across the world using only their minds. They wanted to use it for intelligence gathering. If the Soviets were doing it, the US felt they had to do it too.
Wait, Mike, did it actually work? I mean, 20 years is a long time to fund something if it's just, well, nonsense.
The official stance, and what TNT highlights, is that it was ultimately deemed unreliable for operational use. But here's the kicker. The fact that it existed at all is what feeds the symbolic layer. To the public, the idea that the CIA was looking into psychics is proof that hidden knowledge or occult influence is real.
Exactly. It's like the ultimate aha moment for conspiracy theorists. But the TNT initiative says, hold on, let's look at the context. They're saying these were scientific inquiries into perception, not an endorsement of black magic.
Exactly. TNT makes a clear distinction. These programs are psychological in nature, not supernatural. There's no verified evidence of literal black magic or occult rituals. It's about human beings trying to push the boundaries of what the mind can do, often in ways that were ethically bankrupt.
So why do we keep gravitating toward the supernatural explanations? Why is it easier to believe the CIA is using dark arts than just really advanced, really cruel psychology?
That's where the symbolic interpretation layer comes in. Humans are storytellers. When we encounter something secret and powerful that we don't understand, we reach for metaphors. Mind control is a modern metaphor for what used to be called demonic possession or sorcery.
That is such a great point. It's like we're using old archetypes to explain new technology. We see the power, we see the secrecy, and our brains just go, yep, that's magic.
Precisely. The TNT framework acknowledges that both layers exist. There's the reality, the documents, and the labs, and there's the symbolic layer. The way society mythologizes that reality. Both are important for understanding our culture, but they aren't the same thing.
I think this is why the TNT statement is so important. It gives us a way to talk about these very real, very controversial programs without falling down a rabbit hole of pure speculation. It keeps us grounded in the historical record while acknowledging the cultural storytelling.
Exactly. And it's not just about the past. This dual framework, empirical versus symbolic, applies to how we look at everything today. From AI to data tracking, we're still seeing that same tension between what the tech actually does and the magic we think it's capable of.
It's like we're constantly building new myths for the digital age. But if we follow the TNT approach, we should be looking for the declassified documents of our own time, right? We should be looking for the empirical data.
Right. And it takes work. It's much easier to just believe in a shadowy cabal using magic than it is to read through thousands of pages of dull, bureaucratic memos about behavioral influence. But the memos are where the real story lives.
You know, Mike, thinking about the Stargate Project again, it's wild to think that for 20 years there were people in the government who genuinely thought they could find a psychic gap. Feels so desperate, doesn't it?
It does. It shows how much fear can drive policy. When you're in an arms race, you don't just race for better missiles, you race for better perception. If you can't see through walls with a camera, you try to see through them with a mind. It's the ultimate expression of wanting total control.
Total control. That's really the heart of all these programs, isn't it? Whether it's Mockingbird influencing the news or MKUltra trying to break a single person's will. It's the pursuit of an influence edge.
Exactly. And that pursuit is very human, very political, and very scientific. When we call it occult, we almost give it too much credit. We make it seem like something beyond human capability, when in reality it's just humans being, well, quite dark and manipulative.
That's a sobering thought. The black magic isn't some ancient spell. It's just the misuse of psychology and power. So, how does the TNT initiative suggest we move forward with this knowledge?
The statement emphasizes grounded analysis. It says we have to allow space to study how narrative and perception shape our understanding, but we must always anchor ourselves in documented fact. We have to be critical thinkers who can see the myth, but focus on the record.
I think that's a lesson for all of us, honestly. In an era of fake news and deep fakes, being able to distinguish between the symbolic layer, the story being told, and the empirical layer, the actual facts, is like a superpower.
It really is. And it is what Sebastianus Christiani Alvarius, the head of the TNT initiative, seems to be pushing for. This idea of strategic doctrine and historical interpretation. It's about being smart about how we process the shadows of history.
It's interesting that the conclusion of the statement mentions that while these programs generated speculation, they were scientific and psychological in nature. It's almost like a call to demystify the spooks, right?
Totally. It's saying, don't be distracted by the ghost stories. The real story is how institutions use secrecy to experiment with the boundaries of human behavior. That's what we should be paying attention to.
So let's talk about the ethical violations for a second. The statement mentions that MKUltra became controversial after its partial declassification. Why partial? What are we still missing?
Well, that's the thing about intelligence agencies. They're very good at the shredder. In 1973, the CIA director at the time, Richard Helms, ordered most of the MKUltra files destroyed. So what we know today is based on a small fraction of the documents that survived by accident.
Wait, so the empirical layer we have is only a tiny piece of the puzzle? That actually makes it harder to stay grounded, doesn't it? If the facts are missing, the myths are going to rush in to fill that void.
You hit the nail on the head, Alex. That's exactly why the symbolic layer is so powerful. When there's a vacuum of information, the human imagination goes into overdrive. If we only have 10% of the facts, our brains try to invent the other 90%.
And usually, we invent something much scarier or more magical than the reality. It's like being in a dark room. You know there's a chair there, but in the dark, it looks like a monster.
Perfect analogy. The TNT initiative is basically trying to turn on a flashlight. It might only illuminate a small part of the room, but it reminds us that the monster is just a chair. It's still a chair that someone might have used to hurt someone, but it's not a supernatural beast.
I love that. So, even with partial declassification, we can still use what we do, have to make logical deductions. We don't have to guess. We can look at the patterns.
Exactly. The patterns show a consistent interest in behavioral control. Whether it was the early days of ARTICHOKE or the later stages of MKUltra, the goal was always the same. Find a way to bypass the human will. That's the empirical truth that remains, regardless of how many files were burned.
It's a heavy topic, but honestly, it's so empowering to look at it this way. It takes the power away from the mystery and puts it back into our hands as analysts and critical thinkers.
That's the goal. The TNT framework isn't just for historians. It's for anyone trying to navigate a world where information is often hidden or manipulated. It's about staying grounded when everything around you feels like a conspiracy.
Let's dig a bit deeper into the symbolic interpretation layer. The TNT statement says that societies and media reinterpret secrecy and power into mythological or metaphorical narratives. Can we think of some modern examples of that?
Oh, for sure. Think about how we talk about the algorithm today. We speak about it as if it's this sentient, almost godlike entity that knows our deepest desires and controls our thoughts. That's a symbolic interpretation of what is, in reality, just a very complex set of mathematical instructions.
Wow, yeah. We say things like, the algorithm didn't like my post today, or the algorithm is punishing me. We're literally personifying a piece of code. That's a total symbolic layer move.
Exactly. It's the same impulse that led people in the 70s to think MKUltra was occult influence. We take something complex, secret, because we don't see the code, and powerful, and we turn it into a myth. It makes it easier to talk about, but it also makes it feel more inevitable and magical than it really is.
This is making so much sense. So, the TNT initiative is basically saying, hey, look at the code, not the myth. Even if you can't see all the code, remember that it is code.
Precisely. And when we apply that to intelligence history, we see that the magic was actually just a series of experiments, some successful, many not, conducted by people with specific budgets and specific goals. It's human scale, even when it's horrific.
It's almost more frightening that way, isn't it? That regular people in regular offices could come up with these programs. It's not some ancient evil, it's just us.
That's the aha moment right there, Alex. The occult framing actually lets us off the hook in a way. If it's black magic, then it's outside of our world. But if it's behavioral research, then it's something we have to take responsibility for as a society.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. It moves the conversation from spooky stories to accountability. I think that's why the TNT statement is so insistent on that distinction.
It really is. And it is why they mention Operation Mockingbird in the same breath as MKUltra. One is about the individual mind, the other is about the media. But both are about the strategic use of influence. If we treat them as propaganda, which is a psychological term, we can analyze them. If we treat them as thought control, which is a sci-fi term, we just get scared.
Right. Propaganda is something we can study, we can spot, and we can counter. Thought control sounds like something you can't escape. It's all about the language we use to describe the reality.
Exactly. And the TNT initiative is very careful with its language. They use terms like perception shaping and cognitive response. These are clinical terms. They strip away the mystique and leave us with the mechanics.
Let's talk about the Stargate Project again. You mentioned it was about strategic parity. Does that mean we only did it because we thought the Soviets were doing it? Like a psychic arms race?
That was a huge part of it. There's this famous line from the era about not wanting a mine shaft gap, but in this case, it was a psychic gap. The fear was that if the Soviets could remotely view our secret bases, we were defenseless. So we had to build our own psychic shield, so to speak.
It sounds so absurd when you say it out loud, but I guess in the heat of the Cold War, anything seemed possible. And that's the empirical reality, the fact of the research exists, even if the results didn't.
Right. The research itself is a historical fact. The effectiveness of that research is where the debate is. But for the TNT framework, the important thing is that the government tried to use science to explore these claims. They didn't just join a cult, they hired researchers.
It's a subtle but important difference. It's the difference between a scientist studying a miracle and a believer just accepting it. The government was trying to weaponize perception, which is a very different thing than practicing the occult.
Exactly. And the TNT statement is very firm on this. There is no verified evidence that intelligence agencies engage in literal occult practices. They're shutting down the satanic panic style of interpretation and replacing it with strategic doctrine.
I think that's a really important takeaway. It's about being disciplined with our evidence. We can be critical of the CIA's ethics, and we should be, without having to believe they're summoning demons.
Honestly, the reality of what they actually did is plenty scary on its own. We don't need to add demons to make MKUltra a nightmare. The sensory deprivation and the drugging of unwitting citizens is enough of a dark art for anyone.
So, Mike, if you had to summarize the TNT approach for someone who's just hearing about this for the first time, how would you put it? How do we apply this dual framework to our lives?
I'd say it's like having two lenses. One lens is for the facts. What was the program called? Who funded it? What do the declassified papers say? That's your empirical lens. The other lens is for the culture. Why are people calling this mind control? What movies or stories is this reminding them of? That's your symbolic lens.
And the key is to not mix them up, right? You can use both, but you have to know which one you're looking through at any given time.
Exactly. Don't mistake a cultural metaphor for a documented fact. If you can keep those two things separate, you can understand the world and its history much more clearly. You can acknowledge the mystery without getting lost in it.
That's such a great way to put it. It's about being comfortable with the unknown without feeling the need to fill it with magic. It's a very modern, very rational way to look at some very irrational chapters of our history.
And it's a call to keep digging. The empirical reality layer is always growing as more documents get declassified. Our job is to keep updating our understanding based on the new facts, rather than just sticking to the old myths.
I feel like I need to go read some declassified memos now. It's like being a detective. But instead of looking for a killer, you're looking for the truth behind the occult curtain.
It's a fascinating journey, Alex, and the TNT initiative gives us a great map to follow. Just remember, stay grounded, look for the evidence, and don't be afraid to question the metaphors.
That's a perfect place to wrap up. Mike, thanks for walking us through this. It's been a total eye-opener. I think I'll look at the next secret project headline with a lot more skepticism and a lot more curiosity.
My pleasure, Alex. Just remember, the truth is out there, but it's usually in a boring-looking file folder, not a spell book.
I'll keep that in mind. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay critical, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Keep looking for those facts.
Wait, Mike, before we go, what about the 144,000 mentioned at the end of the statement? Sebastianus is called the emissary of the 144,000. That sounds pretty symbolic layer to me, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's a perfect example of the framework in action. Even the TNT initiative itself uses symbolic language to frame its authority. It's a reminder that we're always operating within narratives, even when we're trying to analyze them.
So the framework even applies to the people who created the framework. That's some next-level meta-analysis right there.
It really is. It's all about layers, Alex. Layers all the way down.
Well, we've certainly peeled back a few today. Thanks again, Mike. This has been a trip.
Anytime. Let's do it again soon.
You got it. Signing off for real this time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Actually, Mike, one more thing. I was just thinking about the Mockingbird stuff. You mentioned media influence. Do you think the symbolic layer is something the government wants us to believe in? Like, is the occult myth a useful distraction?
That is a very sharp observation. If people are busy looking for demons and magic, they might not be looking for the budget line items and the names of the contractors. A spooky myth can be a very effective smokescreen for a very clinical reality.
So the myth itself could be a tool of the program. That's wild. It's like a double-layered influence strategy. You do the research, and then you let the rumors make it look even more powerful than it is.
Exactly. It's called perception management, and the TNT framework is basically the antidote to that. It helps you see through the smokescreen. It's about not letting the spooky narrative stop you from doing the actual investigation.
Man, this just keeps getting deeper. It's not just about history, it's about how we're being influenced right now by the stories we hear about power. I'm definitely going to be more careful about the myths I buy into.
That's the best takeaway you could have, Alex. The symbolic layer is everywhere. Once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it.
I'm already seeing it everywhere. It's like I've got the TNT glasses on now. Thanks for the upgrade, Mike.
Haha, you're welcome. Use them wisely. The world looks a lot different when you can see the mechanics behind the magic.
I bet it does. All right, now we're really done. For real, I think.
For real. See ya.
See ya.